Good afternoon. As you can tell, it is really freaking cold here today. This is Leroy, fashion figure. This is his registered name. I believe he's 12 this year. He is my lesson horse regularly. He used to be a very accomplished show horse in Michigan. My tongue is frozen. And then he got donated to Casanova College. When they closed, he is now my boy. And I use him for lessons. He's had a couple months off. And I'm thinking I might take him back to the show pen this year. But today, we need to start getting him legged back up from his time off. Middle-aged gelding body. He's lost a little bit of top line. And it's really cold and it hurt my soul to put a saddle on. Riding bareback is not necessarily the best thing for your horse's back. The saddle does help disperse your weight. You don't have your actual pelvic bones digging into the muscles of their back. But in this case, we're just walking. We're doing some lateral work. It will be fine. Without the good muscle tone, his saddle doesn't fit all that great anyway. And that's what I'm telling myself. So anyway, here today to work on lateral work. We're going to work on turn of the forehands. I will show you how to introduce it to a horse that maybe doesn't know. And then how you increase the degree of difficulty as they learn. So obviously Leroy knows what he's doing, whether he does it or not today, because he has literally had weeks and weeks off. We'll see. It'll be a good learning experience and make a good video regardless. But anyway, so say you have a horse that maybe doesn't understand the concept of yielding their hip around. So let's start with what a turn on the forehand actually is. The forehand stays still. Their back end pivots around their front end. Tip to know when you are reading those hunt seat equitation patterns, when it says turn on the forehand to the right, you are basically tipping their nose right and their butt goes left. Okay? Vice versa. Turn on the forehand to the left, the nose goes left, which means the butt goes right. All right? Remember that. Otherwise, you're going to get to a show. You're going to see that hunt seat eck pattern. It says turn on the forehand whichever way, and you're going to be totally confused. So anyway, when we're teaching a horse to yield their hip off your leg, you have probably been teaching your horse your leg means go forward, go forward, go forward, go forward. And that is absolutely necessary. You cannot fix anything when training a horse until you have forward installed. A horse that doesn't want to go forward is more likely to hurt you than a horse that is naturally very forward. A horse that likes to kind of, really respond to your leg is far safer than one that stalls up. So we don't want to inadvertently discourage their forward motion because obviously we need to keep them happy about that. We don't want to confuse them. If they don't know turn on the forehand, they're still probably very young in the training process. So the first thing we do is we make sure that they understand how to disengage their hip, right? I'm going to do what is for me a turn on the forehand to the left. This is my left hand. Means I am going to let his nose go left and his hip go right. So when you have a young horse that you're just introducing how to kind of yield the hip, you're going to actually take that left rein, slide your hand down the rein, and just like in those shoulder control videos, you're going to pull their nose around to the left. You're going to also apply left leg back. You're going to slide your left leg back kind of where you would for a canter transition. Same position, right? Kind of slide it back toward their hip a little bit. You're going to push as you ask them to bring their nose around, and you're not going to release that rein or that leg until they step with this hind foot or the other one. Told you I hadn't been ridden in a couple weeks. So I'm going to add leg, and then I'm going to release. See, he moved. He mostly moved front end, but he did move the back end a little bit, right? Now I'm going to ask that way again, and he'll step over softer. He's like, no, I just follow my nose. I'm a broke horse. So if that's what happens, you ask them to bring their nose even further, right? We're not going to bother too much with that right rein. I'm not going to ask him to bring his shoulder around. We're going to ask that. There, he stepped that hip around. So once they have that basic concept that when you pull on that left rein, the butt goes to the right, vice versa. You pull on the right rein, See how his butt stepped left? Good, much better this way, much better. Once they have that basic concept, you're going to start to refine it and up the degree of difficulty. Now, the best way to up the degree of difficulty here, like I said, most of these young horses, you don't want to discourage their forward, but you can't have them going forward while you're doing a turn on the forehand. It defeats the purpose of the front end staying still, right? So we're going to use the wall. So the wall is the bad guy. The wall is the one that's going to tell your horse to hold still, so you don't have to sit there and pull on their face. When you add leg, they step forward, which is exactly what you've taught them to do. You pull on their face and punish them for doing what you've taught them to do. Now we have a wall as a barrier. So you're not the bad guy. You're not confusing them per se. They're a lot quicker to pick up that this is something new, right? That one leg, slightly different position. I need to pay attention. Now leg might mean a different thing depending on where you're using it. All of which is super important as we build up to things like the half halt and two tracking and those sorts of things. So you park your horse perpendicular to the wall. Same thing here. I'm going to want to do, let's say we're going to do a turn on the forehand to the right, okay? His nose goes right, butt goes left. So here I've got the wall, so I don't have to pull back on his face to keep him from walking forward. I'm going to slide this leg back, slide the right leg back toward his butt. I'm going to add leg and maybe touch that right rein a little bit. I'm going to encourage him to go forward and then shift that hip around. There. It's a little bit of a cheater. See how I added right rein pressure and moved his butt over. Good. And you're going to want to kind of do that both ways. You're not going to want to immediately go right back and go the other way. Let your horse take a break. Go walk a circle. Give him a little mental let down in between the right and left. Your horse is not a windshield wiper. They're not just meant to go back and forth. Give them time to absorb each direction separately. I'm going to walk him forward, little circle here, maybe go off screen. I'm going to come back in, up to the wall. We're going to reset. Now I'm going to do a turn on the forehand to the left. My left over here means his butt is going to go toward the camera. That was a little more of a turn on the haunches. There we go. All of these things will help set you up, again, for those canter departures we talked about before, for collection, where he has to actually bend his body in that bit of a C shape, right? So if I wanted to ask him to lope off from here, I actually, if I'm standing still, my first step is a step or two of turn on the forehand. So I would slide my right leg, be our left lead, my right leg. I would slide it back and step him over just about that far. See how he's canted now ever so slightly? And when he lopes off, this hind leg would lope straight through this front shoulder. So this hind leg closest to the wall would lope straight and track with the inside front leg. It would be the opposite. Say I wanted to counter canter. I'm going to slide my left leg back to pick up the right lead. Little outside leg, not turn on the forehand, buddy. We're doing turn on the forehand, not haunch turn, bud. Well, he's canted, but he has not yet yielded his hip. There we go. And now we're over canted for that right lead departure. But I had to make sure he at least yielded. So if I were to ask for a canter from here, I would allow him to take a step or two to straighten up some before I actually cued for the lope. So in that vein, let me walk him ahead and reset him a little bit. In that same vein of thought, we've done our turn on the forehand using the rein opposite of the way their hip is going, right? So their hip is going right, and we've been using our left rein and tipping their nose left. So the easiest way, the baby, the green horse turn on the forehand, is where their nose tipped the opposite direction as their hip is traveling. Now, slightly more advanced level, which I just showed you up at the wall, is to have their head and neck fairly straight, right? So their head and neck is straight and their hip is traveling around. That is about as far as most people will take their horses. But if you really want to get advanced and to up the degree of difficulty, up the level of collection in your horse, you will also then practice and eventually teach them to yield their hip to the inside as they yield their nose to the inside. So their nose is actually bent in the same direction. Their nose is bent right and their hip will travel right. He's not going to want to do this because it takes a lot of strength in their body. And like I said, he's had some weeks off. Now I'm going to walk to the camera with his hip to the inside and his nose slightly bent to the inside. Inside leg bouncing forward. There. I'll walk around the camera. Your inside leg encourages that forward motion. That outside leg slid back encourages their hip to go over. I'm going to walk away from the camera, bent left, nose to the inside, hip to the inside. Woo. Now I'm going to ask him for that actual turn on the forehand this way. See how he wants to back away from it, because it's hard work. Now he wants to evade the pressure of the bit because he's like, I don't want to keep my pole down. I don't want to step around. I haven't used these muscles in months. Tell you a secret. I told him on the cross ties that we were just going to come out here and walk circles. I lied. But you can kind of get an idea if you were watching his feet. The general principle of what you need to be doing for your first steps, your second steps, and your third steps on your turn on the forehand. Turn on the forehand is an incredibly undervalued exercise. It's only utilized in the show ring for the hunt seat horses, as though the hunt seat horses somehow use it more, which I can't for the life of me understand. Because if anything, I think Western horses use it a lot more. Because honestly, it isolates their hindquarters, right? When you are doing a turn on the forehand, the only thing you are moving is their hindquarters. You are developing full rudder control.
Woo.
If you are lacking on your pleasure horse as far as them giving their hip to the inside, if you're struggling with that hind leg first lead change, if you are having a little bit of trouble with, well, just about anything that requires hind end control with your horse, go to your turn on the forehand. That is going to help you so much. Do we need a horse with light shoulders, their weight over their hocks? Yes. And that's where that turn on the haunches, which will be the next video series, one I'm going to do when it is not this cold out. We'll do turn on the haunches at some other point. And yes, that's super valuable, but it's so overrated compared to the turn on the forehand. So I hope to see you again for the next video. Bye.